Hey, what's up, Herdwatching peeps? We have a few minutes while I drive to pick something up at UPS because life must go on. And I thought I would jump on because this morning I had the opportunity to watch a good chunk of Andrew Cuomo's daily, propaganda briefing, whatever. Now, I'll give this to him. The guy is... he's really good in front of a camera. He's steady. Sounds very calming. He's got that good old New York guy kind of vibe thing going. And there were some things about it I liked. I like that he's very quick to be honest with the things the federal government is doing for him. He wanted to convert the FEMA installations over to COVID facilities, though that's not what they were built for. FEMA obviously pushed back because it makes perfect sense for FEMA to push back for being taken off mission. And he called up Donald Trump, and Donald Trump made the change, and boom, FEMA's on the case. Now, that's all good, but you'll notice a recurring theme. The recurring theme is that Andrew Cuomo's New York is utterly unprepared for taking care of its state citizens, and a lot of that lies at the feet. Now granted, nobody was prepared for this, and that's just human nature. When you're running a state government or even a federal government, we saw this with the way Barack Obama and Joe Biden didn't keep the federal stockpiles up to date. Obviously, the Trump administration didn't pump up those stockpiles. I'm sure the Bush administration didn't have the stockpiles where it needed to be. I don't think any government agency ever really has the willpower to pump a lot of money into something like disaster preparedness, where the odds of it being used are very low, and that they can more popularly use that money for something else. Now, we can only blame the government so far for that. In a democracy, ultimately, the government is going to be rewarded for doing the things we want them to do and punished for doing the things we don't want them to do. You actually don't want a democratic government to often do things you don't want them to do because they know better than you. So the reality is, Cuomo knows that what the people in New York wanted him to do was put $750 million into frickin' solar panels, and that's what they were going to reward him with their vote for because they're lefties. And they were not going to reward him if he had not done the solar panel thing but bought a bunch of ventilators that no one was going to use. He would have been punished for that by the voters. So we can only blame these people so far. They only did what we asked them to do. But anyway, the pattern right now is that New York is completely unprepared for what's happening. They're collapsing in the face of it, and they are finding ways to get the federal government to bend over backwards to do the thing they need them to do. And every time the federal government caves and does what Cuomo wants him to do, he's nothing but praiseful, and every time they don't, he kind of lets CNN loose on them in the normal left-wing talking point. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but right now, I want to talk about this insane idea that Cuomo is floating of essentially nationalizing all the ventilators and, by extension, all the healthcare equipment in the nation and all the protective gear in the nation, moving that under federal control, and then having the feds decide where it goes. Now, let's assume for a moment that that was even constitutionally reasonable, which it is not. We have to wonder what it is that Cuomo thinks would come of that as a practical matter. And the reality is he knows what would happen. What would happen is that, because New York is first, for instance, New York would get a whole bunch of stuff, which is obviously what Cuomo wants, which will make up for their woeful lack of being prepared for any of this. And then, the theory, as Cuomo expresses it, is that when New York doesn't need all this gear, then it would get sent to the next group that was peaking on the corona problem, and then the next, and the next, and the next. But that's not what would actually happen. What would actually happen is that New York would get a ton of stuff, and then they would get past their peak moment just when, say, San Francisco or somewhere else was having their peak. And you would instantly be back to a ration system. Like, we would either, people in San Francisco or wherever would wind up dying because they didn't have the equipment they needed, or people in New York would wind up dying because they didn't have the equipment they needed because it had been shifted to San Francisco. So we would have exactly the same situation we have now. People dying because there was no equipment where it was actually needed. But what would be the real difference? What would have actually changed? Under a nationalized distribution system for medical equipment, we would be in a situation where everyone who died, all of the state governors would be absolved of personal responsibility, and they would all point at the feds and say the federal government did this. Either the federal government didn't give us the equipment we needed, or we had the equipment we needed a week ago, but then the federal government came and took it away and gave it to someone else. Either way, the only purpose a nationalized distribution system for medical equipment satisfies is the desperate need of the governors to shift the blame for these deaths from the local government to the federal government, and more specifically to attempt to pin it personally on Donald Trump. Because CNN would go 24/7 with stories about Donald Trump took medical equipment from New York and gave it to Michigan, or Donald Trump took equipment from California and gave it to Texas. And this would suddenly become purely a question of personality assassination in Donald Trump, and not solve the problem, instead of what it is now and what it should be, which is the unfortunate situation that states have made their decisions about how much equipment they wanted to stockpile. And those states are going to have to deal with that situation. And the federal government will attempt to backfill where it can from the very limited national stockpile. And that is unfortunate, and that sucks. But that is the only rational way to approach this situation. The only reason to do it any other way is so that you can blame the federal government for local state government failing, and an attempt to destroy Donald Trump in the process. That's exactly what Andrew Cuomo wants. That's exactly why he's pushing a scheme he knows will fail. And he's reaping the political capital of the standard left-wing tactic right now, which is propose an impossible plan, and then when it can't happen, blame Donald Trump for not implementing your insane plan. Anyway, that's it for now. I got to go do my thing. I just wanted to get that down and out on video. I will talk to you guys later.